Retain can delay color formation or stop it. We can talk about that. Foliar potassium will benefit color at the right time if it's done right, in the right form. Light management, light interception, big impact on color. Dell has and Larry have handouts, and so this is kind of where we take more questions and really dive into it. Any more questions? Okay. We have any sweet tango growers around here? Oh boy. Okay. Let's talk sweet tangos. I imagine most of you guys are not involved with the next big thing, NBT, are you? A couple of you are. Okay. Well, sweet tango has a couple traits. In some ways, they're a little bit like Gala. And Gala is fast becoming the #1 variety in Washington. It's going to overtake Reds in a couple of years. So Gala is a big thing in Washington. And out there, we grow them for size, for fresh pack. And if we can get 88s and 80s, there was a lot more per box than teens and quarts. So we grow things for the right kind of size range out there because it's important to our economics. Sweet tangos, in a lot of cases, if you don't do them right, don't get big enough. And to get the size you want, you have to run almost like a Gala program. So the phosphate foliar, like a 924-3, applied during bloom and petal fall, drive more cell division using seaweed-containing calcium, like System C-Cal, Vigor C-Cal, can help get the size. If you have size challenges, we have the programs to do that. They're also prone to cracking and stem wall cracking like a Gala. First off, do no harm. One of the biggest things you could do to crack a Gala and a sweet tango is using things like provolone, perlan. Why? They'll increase size, but they distort the stem bowl. And there's been some research done at WSU showing that if we use 6-benzyladenine, which is Maxell and Exelis on Gala, we have less cracking than using provolone or perlan. So for Gala and sweet tangos, if you want to push more size, don't use provolone or perlan. Use Maxell or Exelis. That's first off. Next, do a really good job with the calcium during cell division to strengthen that crown bowl. Also, what tends to make the crown bowls crack more is if you let them hang a little longer, same thing on a Gala, if they get the least little bit waxy, you're going to have cracking at harvest and in the box. Over mature fruit, bad deal. Once the ethylene cascades, problem. So we're using Retain, spraying the top part of the tree to slow the tops down to allow the bottoms to catch up. Do it at the right time. We're doing a good job with the N to CA ratio so the fruit's more stable. We don't have that sudden surge of ethylene coming in too soon. That helps on cracking as well. So you're not using as much calcium as you would, say, for a bitter pit program on Honeycrisp, but if you do a good job with calcium, impact the N to CA ratio on the sweet tangos, the miniescas, you'll have less cracking because ethylene is not going to surge too early on you. Proper use of Retain can help with that. Proper use of the PGRs and avoiding the provolone perlan types and use the Maxell Exelis types for cell division, for size and thinning instead. That help?
What about russeting on sweet tango? Is that a concern that you've seen, and how do you handle that?
Russeting on sweet tangos is somewhat similar to rusting we get in Washington on Fuji's. When we have rapid, uneven growth in the fruit early on, we tend to get more russeting. There can also be moisture-induced russeting that provide the product from Valent now can help with, but that's moisture-induced russeting. If it's rapid, uneven growth, not a whole lot you can necessarily do about that. The PGRs will help somewhat. It depends what kind of rusting it is.
So you're saying, I mean, as far as moisture in the air, we're not going to do much with that. Is that what the moisture you're talking about, or are you talking about soil moisture?
I'm talking about humid environments during the cell division of the fruit. Would be comparable to, I'm familiar with Hood River, Oregon, certain places in certain years in the Okanagan, where we have much higher humidity in the air and cool temperatures creates moisture-induced rusting in those areas. And people have historically used a product called Provide, like on Golden Delicious, to help with that. That's different than having where you have rapid growth and it slows down, rapid growth and it slows down. That rapid uneven growth creates its own kind of rusting in Fuji and Sweet Tangos. Certain sprays can also cause that, especially if you apply them in slow drying conditions.
So a consistent soil moisture would be one way to reduce that along with Provide.
It can be a tool you can manage if you have irrigation or whatever you have to supplement. Whatever you can do to even out the growth and adjust for high humidity in the air, like with the Provide, there are things you can do. Also avoiding applying things under slow drying conditions, because that's when you can pick up, rusting from the spray. Overwatering, overwetting, and not overwatering. Overwetting when you spray under slow drying conditions dramatically increases risk of phyto, which is marking leaves, marking fruit, burning leaves. Spray to wet, don't run off. Spray under good drying conditions, it reduces your risk. Don't overwet, don't hose the tree down. That multiplies your risk dramatically. Spray to wet, good coverage, slow down, but don't overwet. You can get better coverage at 100 gallons at 2 miles an hour than going 200 gallons at 3 miles an hour. Trust me, don't overwet. But don't drive too fast either, unless you're using a tower sprayer. Tower sprayers, the physics works with you. Tower sprayers, you can go a little faster with them. But an air blast sprayer, watch the tractor speed. Your fungicides will work better. Everything works better.
So how fast should you go?
If it's an air blast sprayer, 2 miles an hour or less. If it's a tower sprayer, you can go faster depending upon the manufacturer and how your setup is. Tower sprayers, the vertical ones, they're spraying straight in. Air blast is spraying up and in. It takes more time and more air to displace. To do that, you have to go slower.
When would you apply that retain? When would you say on that?
Like on galas or on the Sweet Tangos. What you want to do, check the valent label, and you want to do it before the ethylene takes off. What typically we'll do is we'll spray the upper half, upper 2/3 of the tree before the ethylene begins to build. There's some very specific things on that retain label in terms of applying it on the coolest part of the day. And unlike in the spring, you apply it during the slow drying conditions in the summertime, but you got to be ahead of the ethylene to make it work. So with this session, I'm going to keep it informal again. If you have more questions, like Larry said, feel free to ask them from the previous session. This time we'll talk a little bit more about the plant growth regulators, the PGRs. There are some very good tools there. We'll talk about some things you can do to get free rides so you're not making special trips. We can also make some of the PGRs work better. If you're going to spend a fair amount of money on an Apogee or a Promolan or a Perlan or a Retain, they're not cheap. It's wise to make them work as well as we can. And so we'll talk about.
Do you have these as handouts during the check to see if
They can. I don't think they have them out here yet, but they can print them out. And so we can do that. Yeah. Thank you. Good idea. And so we'll start with Apogee and Kudos. Kudos is a brand new generic version of Apogee. How many of you guys just raise your hands if you're using Apogee or Kudos? Fair amount of you. Okay. It's a great tool. Apogee from BASF, Kudos from Fine. What they are is an anti-gibberellin product. And you use them to help reduce the amount of pruning. They can also help reduce the amount and severity of a fire blight run. And they can channel some of the energy and some of the calcium to the fruit versus all that extension of terminal growth. Very good tool if you use it properly. The one thing about Apogee is it goes on right during peak demand for calcium. And in the past, if you look at the BASF label, it'll say don't apply calcium with it because calcium will deactivate the Apogee. Certain forms will do that. Calcium chloride will deactivate Apogee in the tank. Calcium nitrate will deactivate Apogee in the tank, or kudos. Calcium chloride, calcium oxide. The only form of calcium you can use with Apogee that has any kind of data supporting its use and not deactivating the Apogee or the kudos is a calcium phosphite, System Cal or System C-Cal. Because in the case of System Cal or System C-Cal, that calcium is tied to a phosphite and it's a very, very low pH, it does not deactivate the Apogee. So right there when you're making the Apogee application, you can actually put those forms of calcium with it. Now Vigor Cal, you can't do that with. Vigor Cal, Bor Moly, great tools, but they will deactivate Apogee, as will the others. It's only calcium phosphite, it's only the system products you can use with Apogee and not deactivate the Apogee. So on Honeycrisp, other bitter pit prone varieties, or things you want to store well or get good calcium levels in, we can use that Apogee or kudos ride and get calcium in there. And the data's there to support it. There's a couple brochures over here that have that data in it. Maxell, Excellus. How many guys gals use Maxell or Excellus? Great tool, great tool. 6-benzyladenine. In the West, we primarily use it for size on Gala. Here in the Midwest and East, you get thinning as well as some size from it. Very good tool, especially like on Gala, Empire, Sweet Tango. Generate more cell division, more size fruit. Also has some thinning characteristics back here. Be careful you don't overdo it. When you're dealing with some of these plant growth regulators like the Promelin, Perlan, Maxell, Excellus, they're large molecules. Large molecules have a hard time getting into the fruit rapidly. That's why in many cases, back in the old days of Abbott Labs when they first came out with Promelin, Abbott's now part of Valent, they recommended applying under slow drying conditions, give it more time to go in. One of the neat things about phosphites, especially low pH phosphites like System Cal, System C-Cal, is they help penetrate those things in so you get those to work consistently. So if you want to improve the performance of Promelin, Perlan, Maxell, Excellus, these are great tools. They're also a free ride for your calcium. So they're helping the PGR, but you're getting the calcium at the same time. Very good approach. 7. 7 is very sensitive to high pH water. If you want to make 7 consistent, year in, year out, if you have high pH water, you want to acidify or buffer it. Well, the System Cal, System C-Cal is a very good acidifier buffer. You don't need to add buffer to your 7 if you're already using System C-Cal or System Cal. You don't need to spend money for the buffer because it's already there. Lorsban, chlorpyrifos, same way. All the organophosphates, carbamates really need to be in an acidic solution, otherwise they break down in the tank very rapidly from acid hydrolysis. And so if we use the system products in there, System Cal, System C-Cal, they're a built-in acidifier buffer that will make them more durable in the tank and give you the performance you want out of those sprays.
When you say quickly, how quickly do they break down?
Depends upon the pH. The question was, how fast do those materials break down in the tank? It depends upon the pH of the water. The higher the pH is, the faster they break down. When you get much over about 6.5, and as you move above 7, it can be a matter of 30 minutes to an hour. Imidan, terrible that way. 7, pretty bad. Chlorpyrifos, not quite as bad, but bad. When you get in the 7s, they drop right down. But if you're using the System Cal, System C-Cal, the buffer's already there. Don't worry about it. You got it covered. Retain. moderately expensive tool, but a very good tool to help harvest management. Also, in specific varieties, if you have galas or sweet tangos that tend to want to mature too quickly on the top of the tree, and it gets ahead of the ones at the lower part of the canopy, you can spray that top part of the canopy with the retain at the right time, slow those down, allow the bottom part of the canopy to catch up. That way you have more uniform harvest maturity, you don't have as many picks into it, and also you don't have the top ones getting over mature, getting greasy and cracking. But retain has to go on before the ethylene takes off. You're better to be too early than too late. If you can be a week early and be fine, but if you're 2 days late with retain, it's not going to work very well. It's also a big molecule, like sticking a pig through a hose. So the calcium phosphate, System Cal, can be very helpful getting it in and also acidifying it. It performs better in an acidic solution. Plus you're applying calcium at the same time, which you want to be doing anyway. So retain, System Cal, very good tool.
So when would you put retain on as the timing, so it's still going to be effective and control the size? When would be the timing on that?
You really want to check the valent label, but the key thing when you read that label is they want you to understand you're generally about 30 days pre-harvest. You've got to be ahead of the ethylene.
What was the question, Ken? We didn't get that.
The question was, what kind of timing do I want to use on my retain sprays to make them work well? And the key is not to be late. You're usually looking at 30 days prior to estimated harvest. But check that label from Valent on retain, and it's a very clear thing. It's better to be a little early than a little late. System Cal can be very beneficial to it because it acidifies it, also gets that big molecule into the fruit, and supply calcium at the same time. Yes, sir.
If you're using a retain on sweet tango, for example, how much of a delay in maturity would
How much delay do I get? That will depend upon how early you are, the rate, and how far the ethylene has gone. You can't make a one-size-fits-all. If you have a nearby Valent rep, he'd be the person I would tend to talk to on that. Basically, the earlier you go, the longer the delay is. The higher the rate, the earlier you go, the longer the delay is. And you can adjust that, tweak it. The guys in the West are tweaking that, but the conditions there are far, far different where I am than what you guys have. We get hotter, stay hotter, and that changes things. So I get a little leery of trying to tell you guys in your conditions on that product because it is a very sensitive timing. And how you tweak it will determine how much delay you get. But in the West, they're using it as much for a harvest management tool to allow them to get enough labor to pick these big blocks. Use it as much for that as they do using it on Gala or Sweet Tangos to avoid cracking. So they can delay it to give themselves more time to get a block picked because labor is getting really, really short.
I had some poor experience using Apogee and System Cal. Maybe it's the fact that I sprayed only twice. Is that a contributing problem?
The question was, I used the Apogee with System Cal and got so-so, not the best results. A couple of key things with Apogee. Don't start too late. If you have too much growth, if the genie gets out of the bottle too far, it's not going to work as well. And it really does take 3 applications to do the job you want. So those 2 things are the key things from an Apogee standpoint. And make sure you condition the water as the Apogee label recommends.
Thank you.
Yep, good question. Yes?
Why did you not put Brutone up there as
Brutone, NAA. Depending upon the variety, NAA or Brutone, any of those kind of products, there's a number of them out there now.
question, Ken?
Yes, the question was, what about use of Brutone? Why didn't I put Brutone up there? I didn't put it up there, not because it's not a good tool, but because it's a very specialized tool where you should put it. If you have a variety that doesn't want a size, in our case, galas, which is a big variety, or empires in the east, sweet tangos, depending upon your situation, NAA is a cell division inhibitor. That's how it works. It reduces fruit size. So I'm very, very careful how and when and what varieties I use NAA on, or fruitone. Because the mode of action, if I have something that wants to be small, it'll make it smaller. So
What about NAA for return bloom?
NAA can be an effective tool for that, but there's a variety of things you can do. There's always consequences to NAA. It does put a certain amount of stress on the tree, right? In Honeycrisp, you got to be aware it's a balancing act. If you have a heavy load on a Honeycrisp tree and you want to impact return bloom, then NAA in a heavy load can be good. If you have a light load, you're probably going to have good return bloom anyway, right? Generally, it's resting more spurs. So then you can use NAA and not have a problem with the heavy load, but not on a light load Honeycrisp, not on a gala. I wouldn't necessarily use it on a sweet tango or mini Esca.
What would you do to get a better return bloom? That's not.
Yeah. Question was, what do I use if I want to get more return bloom but not use NAA for some of those specific situations? You want to use a good overall nutrition program that has good phosphate during cell division and bud differentiation and post-harvest for the energy. I want to make sure that I'm not overdoing nitrogen, which keeps things vegetative. If you go excess on nitrogen, that tree wants to stay vegetative and not have bloom on it. Don't overdo the N, especially in high organic matter soils. That will reduce your bloom. If you overdo it, you can have less bloom. It'll be more vegetative. Also, you won't set as much of your fruit, your bloom. So watch the excess nitrogen. So phosphate, but also seaweeds. Seaweeds applied during that petal fall, post-petal fall period, during the the bud differentiation period, and doing a good job with your post-harvest sprays, that's what's going to impact return bloom. I got a number of guys, Wayne County, New York, for example, certain cases in Michigan, that have been doing the Agro program with the seaweeds in it, the 924-3, the high phosphate during cell division, post petal fall, and then using the 0-20-26 post-harvest and getting solid return bloom. But they aren't overdoing N, and you're doing a good job using the seaweeds at the right time, the phosphate at the right time, the micros. The micros like the zincs, the mags, coppers, play a big role in that as well. But NAA can be a good tool, just be careful where you put it and when you put it. So, stems on mini Esca. When you get towards harvest and you turn that fruit to look at the background color, to look at what that, to kind of gauge the maturity, gauge the color, what happens when you twist that fruit? In many cases, it comes right off in your hand. And that's a problem. The NBT group has had major concerns over that. If you twist the fruit, look at it, you just picked it right there. What you can do to modify those stems is use the System C-Cal, Vigor C-Cal, good calcium programs early on, but the seaweeds during that cell division post-petal fall window, make those stems, you can turn it 180 degrees and it'll go right back. Much better stems, which on mini Esca is no small thing. Better for harvest and less of them coming off in your hand.
I feel like I missed something, but so it's always been System Cal, and now it's System C-Cal.
We have both.
Are they
Yeah.
two different? They're two different applications. Two different.
The question is, you've always had, or we have for quite a while, had System Cal.
Yeah.
We still have it. But we also have System C-Cal, which is a new product. What we did is we took some of the water out of the System Cal, water out, and put Sim spray in it for the seaweed, so it's more convenient. We have less water in that jug and more active ingredient, in this case, seaweed with it, because the same time you want the calcium is a good time to put seaweed in there. And the seaweed can help you on the stems, for example. It can help you on size on Sweet Tango. It can reduce stress. It helps set. And so System C-Cal is becoming more and more used in apples, pears, cherries, berries across the northwest and western U.S.
And that's why the system spray is not on the spray guide that for Honeycrisp. Is that right?
Right, it's been replaced in most cases by the,
By the system C-Cal.
right. We still have it. It's not gone away. But in many cases, especially if you have a heavy crop load on the Honeycrisp and you're not going to quite get the size you want, that can be a good fit for it.
So then, if you have a system cal left over, use it, but use system spray with it. And if you want to just go system C-Cal, then forget this sim spray because it's it.
Right. You know, can you use your leftover System Cal and put Sim Spray with it? Absolutely. Use up your old System Cal that way. Yeah. Now, if I have a light load on Honeycrisp, I may not want to put the Sim Spray with it or use System C-Cal. If I have a light load that's going to get big fruit anyway, I probably don't want to push them that much bigger, do I? So you got to be a little more thoughtful on what you use. You can't use one size fits all every year. In a light crop load, you don't want big fruit. You don't want to push them any bigger. But in a really big crop year with a heavy load, you may want to encourage them a little bit more. Or if you have a smaller variety like a Sweet Tango or a Gala, you can increase your yields because more big fruit is a higher yield, right? So it doesn't take as many fruit to fill a bin when they're, 80s and 88s versus 112s.
Are you suggesting then that this might be used instead of a stop drop?
I don't advocate it as a replacement for a stop drop, but it can be used in addition to it to help it.
Okay, because the new Minnesota variety coming out, we've been warned that it has that issue,
Mhm.
dropping.
Yeah. When you're using the phosphites early on, the System Cal, the System Zinc, System Z-Mag, those are very potent vascular system stimulators. And the key thing for avoiding stop drop is having a good vascular connection from the tree to that fruit. Also, the seaweeds have a benefit in that and make them more flexible, keep them green longer, reduce premature ethylene, which is again promotes drop. So there's a couple of mechanisms that's working for, but the start of that takes place early. It takes place during fruit formation, cell division. That's when you want the calcium phosphites in there. You want the seaweed in there. And then later on, if you have one that's really prone to dropping, some Vigor C-Cal, for example. You don't need the calcium phosphite, just use this Vigor C-Cal.
So does all this chemistry work at the abscission layer?
It works in the whole vascular system in terms of the phosphites.
Okay.
In terms of the seaweed, it's throughout the tree, reducing the sudden surge of ethylene and also keeping that vascular system unstressed and healthy.
Ken, I had growers call and say, you're twisting the apple, reminded me of it. They said one side of the fruit looked beautiful, they trimmed it on the other side, and it hadn't even started coloring. Was that large canopy, reducing light, or was that a nutritional issue?
Both, probably. Usually when you have color problems, a couple issues come into play. Too much nitrogen at the wrong time, especially late, interferes with it. Late use of phosphites, going during color formation and beyond with the phosphites, going to bring that N up. Bad pruning where you don't have good light. Rootstock. Lack of potassium during color formation. So the potassium finishing solution in particular can be a very, very good tool at color break and beyond to push more color. If you're deficient on potassium, you're not going to color as well. Also in lower pHs, copper nutrient-based copper, not a fungicidal copper, but nutrient-based copper, can be very beneficial on color.
What rate with the copper?
Bigger copper, 12 to 16 ounces, but do it during good drying conditions, and don't overwet it. Paul.
Do you have any comments about how to reduce stem length on Honeycrisp?
Stem length? That's a pretty subtle deal. The big thing is, again, not overdoing nitrogen is a big thing. That's probably the biggest one you can control without doing other things. If you cut some things back to reduce that, you'll create other problems. But the one you can cut back without causing other problems is primarily not overdoing nitrogen.
How do we measure the amount of nitrogen? We know that Honeycrisp will tend to run out if we are overcropping it and not enough. So we're kind of on that edge of what do we do about it?
Yes. The question was, in Honeycrisp, it has to be a really fine balance on nitrogen. And really, it's analyzing your soils, analyzing the leaves, analyzing the fruits, all three of those things, to understand where you are. And also understand where you are in terms of organic matter in that soil. That's why the soil test is so important. If you have high organic matter, you want to quantify that and understand it. The form of nitrogen you're using in the soil, using a calcium nitrate versus a urea form. So it's there when I want it and it's gone. So in Honeycrisp, it's a very fine line because Dell's right. If you get too low, you'll runk the tree out. So it's a fine line in Honeycrisp. They're a temperamental, picky apple. Job security for people like Dell and Larry and myself. They're a bugger. No easy answers. I wish there was. Make things easier. Well, that's all I had. I want to keep us on time. Any more questions?
How about some of the other items that you wrote on your sheets?
Yeah, that's what I would say too. Some of the concerns that you had that you brought up, maybe this is the time to ask them of Ken right now. Lunch is in about 20 minutes, so we have 20 minutes to do a Q&A with Ken.
I'm going to borrow your sheet for a second.
Go ahead.
One thing I want to make sure you guys pick up is this right here, this chart right here. This is a really visual guide to the peak demand of the given nutrients. Peak demand in that fruit and in that tree is not a flat line. Peak demand is determined by how the tree and the fruit utilizes a given nutrient. This helps you time things more effectively and stay on course. This and the programs Agro has for you help you to determine the best timing. So use this and the programs, and you'll be a lot more effective on your sprays as far as nutrition goes. So make sure you get one of these before you leave.
You know that remedy is fine for people who want to use that as a breakfast placemat.
Yeah.
If you eat breakfast, you can glance at that and see, what am I going to do today?
Can you talk a bit about the new Honeycrisp color sports, specifically Cameron Select and Royal Red?
Firestorm.
Okay, that's the third one, right?
Okay. My opinion is they're too new to make huge comments on. As you know, when you're first trying out a variety, you got to give them a little time to settle out to determine what they're really going to be like. It's really hard to comment. And what tends to happen way too often in the fruit deal is we'll see something that sounds and initially looks good, but once they've been in the ground 7 years, they're not quite what we thought they were. That's what I'm referring to. Sometimes in the push to get more color and be able to pick it in 1 or 2 picks, you wind up giving up something else, but you don't realize what that is until 5 years, 7 years down the road. That's all I can say. I can't be more specific than that. And it'll really depend upon the area, I think, too.
I was just curious with Royal Red anyway, they're asking usually like $1.50 royalty, which seems like this ought to be something special.
Not always.
That much.
Don't know. Again, it's too early to tell for sure. in my opinion. That's just me.
Are Washington growers top working their standard Honeycrisp?
Washington's a more complex thing than that. If you want to hear how Washington is evolving, here's how I see it evolving. There's three basic human emotions: greed, greed, and greed. And Washington is no different. And so they planted a whole bunch of Honeycrisp in these southern warm districts where Honeycrisp have no business being. When you have high heat, you have more bitter pit and you have poor storage. That's all there is to it. They're putting expensive netting across it. They're doing all kinds of things trying to reduce the impact of that hot, early hot climate. And so what I see happening is in the next 3 to 5 years, 3 to 6 years, a lot of that in the southern districts, the hottest spots where some of that was planted, is going to come out and go to Cosmic Crisp in Washington 2. From I-90 north, the Honeycrisp is going to stay, especially in the high elevation areas, and do well, and those newer varieties might begin to come into play. Gala is still increasing. Goldens are going out, Reds are going out, Brayburns are up, all but gone. Cameos are fading fast. So that's kind of the trends in Washington. But in the really hot areas of Washington, basically from I-90 south, talk about Mattawa, Tri-Cities, Lower Yakima Valley, been a lot of Honeycrisp put in over the past 5 or 6 years. I'd say in the next 5 or 6, fair amount of that's going to be going out and going to friendlier, less expensive apples for them to grow, which would be like the Cosmic Crisp and the Washington 2, more Gala, early Fujis.
What are you seeing on rootstock? Any new information on?
You know, probably the most interest going on with rootstocks right now is stuff coming out of Geneva, as much as anything. There's still the the Bud 9s, things like that.
You know, I've been trying to tie surface energy of the fruit or the leaves and how that surface energy is variable versus the PGRs.
Mm-hmm.
And could you, I would like to think that the surface energy is continually moving on leaves and on fruit, and if you could optimize your surface energy of your PGR with that leaf, that you're going to get the best wetting possible. Does that make any sense?
You got from surface energy to wetting. I'm not sure I'm following you.
Well, if the surface energy of the leaf is X and the surface energy of the PGR is Y, optimally what we want to do is we want to be able to have that wet into that leaf as optimal as possible, correct?
The PGR?
Yeah, any of the
Yeah,
PGRs.
Sure.
So we want that to wet.
Or
we
the
want it to
fruit,
be-
depending.
or the fruit.
It depends upon which PGR. Different PGRs are doing different things. You can't group them as a one big.
Okay, right. But systemically, we want it to. Ideally, we want to have a good systemic reaction.
You want good uptake, what you're talking
Exactly, great uptake.
Right.
And so does the surface energy of the leaf or the fruit change based on different applications, whether it's temperature versus, and so how can you tie that into being able to get optimal use out of the product?
about. Okay. The question is, in looking at the status of the leaf and the PGR, what's the best things to look at in terms of getting the uptake, which determines the performance of these PGRs? And you guys here in Michigan, New York have an advantage over Washington.
Excuse me, Ken, just so
Yeah.
it's not only the PGRs, but it would be any of these, because I think they all would have to have different surface energies.
Yes.
So with all having different surface energies, understanding how we can optimize those energies to be able to wet is, I guess,
Yeah.
the question.
I look at it more as being a physiological issue, okay? And by that I mean, what's happening to the structure of the leaf and how does the environment change that, and how do we accommodate that with the sprays?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so in Washington, we're high desert. Very high light intensity early on throughout the whole season. What that does is it forces the tree, any plant for that matter, to react and release more waxes on the cuticle, the surface of that leaf. The more UV light, the more intensity of it, the more waxes will build up. Same thing in California on nuts or grapes. The western environment, we have this light intensity. It causes a reaction by the plant. More waxes, thicker waxy cuticle, harder to penetrate with sprays. Okay. When you have more waxes and more cuticle there, what you'll find is lower pH forms go in better than neutral or high pH. They break the waxes better. So your low pH phosphites, very good about going in. They'll break the waxes and go in better than a neutral or higher pH. So look at that first off. Spraying to wet without runoff is where you want to be in terms of spray volume. It's more efficient. You're not filling the sprayer as often. You have less chances of marking fruit or burning leaves. Spray to wet, no runoff. Avoid runoff. Big thing. You guys don't get the wax buildup that we do in the West. So you don't have nearly as bad of a problem getting things in. In fact, you have higher risk of causing rusting and burning than we do because we have those thick wax that build up pretty early. You guys don't. It's a double-edged sword. That make sense?
Are there any concerns about any of your products in conjunction with Smart Fresh?
You're talking about MCP, Smart Fresh Harvista. There's not been a whole lot of work done with them together. A little bit with System Cal. It seems fine, but it's early on in the process. I'm happy to talk about Retain, happy to talk about other things, but the Harvista, MCP, Smart Fresh, I'd like to see more of it done before I make too much comment. I would suspect it would be the same, but I don't know that.
Maybe there's some of our growers have been using Smart Fresh. Anyone here that was JP?
I haven't seen any of it
Yeah.
abnormal effects or reduced effects. I've used System Cal and a lot of the Agro K stuff across the board, and I've used Smart Fresh on everything from Max, Cortland's, Honeycrisp, Harrelson, Regents, Red Delicious, and Adult.
Yeah.
Smart Fresh, I think, really depends on temperature of the apples at harvest, temperature of the apples when you apply the Smart Fresh, more so than like nutrient levels in the fruit.
Yeah. I would expect he's totally right because if you look at the AI of that product versus the Retains, they're very similar. So I would expect no problem. And there's an example of it. It should be just fine doing it. And whatever you do to make the ethylene surge delayed and allow the Harvest Fresh, the Smart Fresh, the Retains to work, the better it's going to perform.
Excuse me, what temperature are you
I believe they say that when Smart Fresh is applied, the internal core of the temp of the apple needs to be below 65 degrees, and then it needs to be kept below 40 degrees. Once if the internal of the apple, temperature of the apple goes above 40, then the Smart Fresh starts to wear off. But I think it really has to do a lot with the application parameters. For instance, if we're doing Macintosh, you've got to put those apples into not cold storage, but just room temperature overnight, or maybe even in some cases 2 or 3 nights before we Smart Fresh them. Any kind of variances I think that we've seen in Smart Fresh is because we haven't treated the food properly versus any nutrient issues or anything like that. So Harrelsons are the thing that we do the most by far. So typically at that time of the year when we're harvesting, the temperature is below 60. So a lot of times we can go straight from the orchard to application. But any kind of early season stuff that you're picking, if it's hot outside, you gotta let it sit, in the shed overnight, or maybe 2 nights before you treat it.
Very good, thanks. That's very accurate. Okay, I'll be around afterwards. Thank you very much.
Agro K is always bringing on, Ken talked about the System C-Cal and the Vigor C-Cal. Could you talk to him about Top Set?
Yes, Top Set is a new product. Can you hear me back with the microphone? Okay. Topset's a brand new product that we came out with this past fall, and basically it's a boric acid. It's a good form of boron. It's not soluble. It isn't sodium borate. It's boric acid, a little over 90%, and I think it's about 0.5% molybdenum. So we get the boron and the moly in one jug for more convenience, and you can put it on at the same time. It's the best way to do it because the molybdenum makes the boron work better. Like I said before, it encourages the tree to produce more pollen for more pollination, make the blooms more receptive to that pollen. So from a set standpoint, or putting on post-harvest for the following spring, great tool. But you want to go on post-harvest when the leaves are in good condition, and again in the spring, pre-bloom, first bloom, in that time frame.
That's new varieties you use.
Top set.
Now you also have bigger cow or malt.
Yes.
Now, explain the difference. You have one without calcium.
The question was, what's the difference between bigger cow bore moly, which has been around a couple of years, and top set? Top set has a higher AI, higher amount of boron and moly than bigger cow bore moly. Top set doesn't have calcium.
So is one offset better than in the fall as opposed to the spring? What is different?
The question was, is the top set better for the spring or the fall? Which one? I think that what you're going to wind up doing over time, depending upon the variety and situation, is probably go to top set and just use it with another form of calcium versus the bigger cow bore moly. You can get more boron and moly with the right amount of calcium for less money that way. You can tailor it more effectively that way. For sure, post-harvest, you want the top set. You can still use bigger cow bore moly. If you prefer that, absolutely. If you have varieties or soils that have high boron, don't need much boron in it, bigger cow bore moly would be that tool. A lot of places in Central California that have huge amounts of boron in the water, bigger cow bore moly is perfect because it doesn't overdo the boron. Other places where boron is deficient, you want more AI of boron than you can get at the lower rates of bigger cow bore moly. They're both good tools.
Speak to the 0, 18, 25, 1% boron. Now we have 0, 20, 26.
Yeah. Two AgriBest products we had, the 01825 with boron, and now we have the AgriBest 02026 with no boron in it. As I mentioned, California has a lot of areas that have almost boron toxicity. So we had to have a tool for them that didn't load up more boron. So we came up with a material that had more P and K per dollar, and went with that, 02026, and we had the 01825 with boron in it, where you want a little bit of boron in that formulation.
They usually use that in fall application.
Fall application. Yeah, you don't really want to use 01825 or 02026 until post-harvest.
What should you expect from the spring application of this concept along with Chelsea?
What you can expect is better chances of a good solid set. Which, like in the case of a Honeycrisp, the more you set, the better the fruit load, the less bitter fruit you have, and of course, more fruit, more dollars. On varieties that are hard to set, or if you have wine grapes that are hard to set or shatter, it's a very good tool for those situations. You'll have more boron to synergize the calcium as well. If you have good levels of boron during cell division, it synergizes calcium. It makes the calcium work better to help get better cellular structure in that fruit, to have better storability and less bitter fruit.
Question about soil samples. Is now a good time, or should we wait for a while, or frost is out of the ground, we're getting soil samples, is that all right, or should we wait till it starts to happen a little bit?
We're delicate. I don't know how long.
Right there.
Understood.
Soil samples now, or wait a while?
Well, generally, we say do it at the same time, roughly the same time from year to year. And probably that's more important than actually.
Most of the time we do fall,
Yeah.
because then you can make those amendments if needed, and that will be there for the spring. So if you do the spring soil test, and you amend the soil, you're not gonna get much benefit of that amendment until.
In the West, we do it.
We've kind of missed fall already.
Yeah. What we generally do in the West is do late summer fall. That's what we do in the woods. But we don't have as hard of winters as you guys do, so it's not quite the same.
When you have the soil probe in your hand, it's the best time to do it.
But do it like Dale says, same time every year. Be consistent.
But in relation to what Larry just said about putting on amendments, we're trying to change the amendments. I think fall is the best time for a lot of things, like potassium, gypsum, getting it on in fall. Give us some time over winter for it to work in the soil. We just soon not have some of that on in the spring.
Doesn't pH typically come around this between fall and spring too?
It can vary. I'm not sure the actual biological activity can affect pH as well. So depending on some of the things that are going on in the soil, it can change. It can change from a half point easily.